Today's guest is Giovanna Elias, who is a cross between Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, Brene Brown's The Power of Vulnerability, Marshall Rosenberg's Nonviolent Communication, and Dr. Joe Dispenza's Integration of Both Science and Spirituality. Giovanna is somebody who has spent the last 10 years traveling the world, observing human behavior, and asking what truly makes us happy, healthy, and fulfilled. So, Giovanna, thank you very much for being on. How are you doing today?
Doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
You're
It's a
very
pleasure.
welcome. I'm excited to dive into all this with you because,
Mm,
just like from that short intro, there's like this eclectic like spectrum
Mix.
of things that you do, which I think is very common with the people that I tend to attract for this podcast to begin with. So I'd love for you to dive into like what is it that you do? How did you get to doing what you're doing? Floor is yours for that.
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, I call myself a human connection and communication expert. And I really do believe that the quality of our lives is based on the quality of our relationships. So, I teach people how to communicate effectively, how to lead greatly, and how to connect deeply in their lives. And if we really stop and think about it, every problem in life comes down to it being a people problem on some level, whether it's the relationship we have with ourselves or the relationship we have with any other person in our life. This is really the basis of all of it. So if people could actually learn how to talk to each other, how to understand each other, and how to connect deeply, I think we would have a very, very different planet we'd be living on today. So, in a nutshell, I've taken my communications and human rights background and mixed it with my holistic medical background. And I paired it together and I've built out what I call my 9 key system, the connection code. And I walk people through these 9 keys to essentially be able to build these deep connections, whether they be work relationships, colleagues, clients, business partners, all the way to our family relationships, friendships, our romantic partners, and even just meeting complete strangers. So that's it pretty much in a nutshell.
That's a pretty good nutshell. And what was coming up in my head while you were sharing all of that, I'm like, yeah, I do agree that improving our ability to maintain and facilitate and navigate relationship of all kinds, including the ones with ourselves. I'm like, yeah,
Mm.
we probably have less reality TV, but it would be a much better world. You know what I mean? So I'm like, yeah, 100%. I would agree with that because there just wouldn't be enough room for the drama. So
Totally,
yeah,
totally. Yeah.
I'm all
Imagine.
in for that,
Yeah.
100%. So what I'm curious then is, like, you clearly have this very, like I said, eclectic background. I mean, to break down what you do into 9 keys that are reliable to move somebody through a transformation of their relationships. Um, like, it's abundantly clear to me, like, okay, like what you are very good at what you do, especially when you can kind of communicate it with that clarity and with that type of confidence. So what I'm curious then for you is what is happening right now within your business that you're finding challenging.
Yeah, I would say I've spent so my business kicked off literally days before COVID hit. And initially I had a mortar, what do they call it? It's not mortar and pestle,
Brick and mortar.
brick and mortar. There we go. I had a brick and mortar type of business. I had my clinic. I had clients coming in, moved it all online, currently living in Mexico. Everything is still currently running off referrals. Now, I would say because of the nature of my work, I'm very fortunate that I retain my clients and that they refer me out. But that's not sustainable and that's not clear systems. And so I'm at a point where I'm saying, okay, how do I efficiently bring in more like lead generation, more people into my business and do it organically, not strictly organically, but preferably. But there are a lot of blocks. So, me reaching out to people on Facebook or on LinkedIn, I don't have a problem doing that and communicating like this because that's the nature of my work. But I have a block in terms of feeling like I'm selling. Like, I would never want to force my work onto someone. I would never want to feel like that kind of like grimy car salesman type person. I'm more of the nature that I actually like to do things like this. I like to do public speaking and podcasts and put myself out there. People can feel my energy and then they say, I actually want to work with her. That aligns, that feels good. And so I'm at a point where I would rather have clients coming in in a way that felt best for me, where I can be, you know, just sort of the most outmost exposure possible, that I just have clients coming in regularly, as opposed to feeling like I need to be the one selling them and convincing them that they need to come and see the value of my work. And so on a physical level, there's a complete block as to like, I know all the things I need to do to reach out to people and message them and say, hey, sign up for a call. Very easy to do that when I'm just connecting. Totally different story when I'm like, I need to sell you my, you know, $7,000 or $8,000 program.
Yep.
So there it is. Yeah.
Got it. So in the work that you do, I'm assuming you handle people like wanting a new relationship or wanting to be in a relationship.
Yeah, and it's not just strictly romantic relationships. It's on all levels. So it could be a business owner that says, I want to have a stronger, more cohesive team, like teamwork type energy in the business, or I want to have a better relationship with my business partner, or it could be like family relationships, or even people that are shy, don't know how to network, don't know how to go out and talk to each other, don't know how to date. So it can show up in multiple levels. I've had couples come to me about their sex life. I mean, that's communication too, right? So where communication and connection shows up, which is, like I said, every relationship, every area of our life, is what I teach. I'm like, when it comes to sales, you put the same, it's not even sales. It's like bringing them in. Because if I'm on a call like this with you, I'm like, I can chat with you till, you know, till the cows come home. But bringing you to this makes me feel like I have to like twist your arm to get here. And I would never want to do that.
Perfect. So if you had a client who was, let's just say, in this kind of state of maybe isolation is a little bit too extreme, but this state where, let's just say, they were looking to date and they had the same hesitation about, you know, I want to be wanted, I want to be desired, I don't want to have to go and like pitch myself to a potential mate, like that just feels very transactional, feels very manipulative. What would you tell them?
It's an excellent question. I'm all about like putting yourself out there in the most authentic, organic, natural way possible. So, and it's a confidence piece for one. How secure do they feel in themselves? Um, I know this is coming back to me. Like, I'm like, I see where you're going with this course. I think it's about, I'm playing chess over here because I'm like, how do I illustrate this?
So if you know where it's
yeah,
going, right? Like you don't have to answer the
yeah,
superficial question. Like if you know where it's going, right? And you see the parallel between a client having certain limiting thoughts or narratives around what it means to go out and elicit what I want. Okay. How does that relate to you in your situation? Essentially, how would you coach yourself in this situation?
I think there's a slight difference in that. Let's say this guy wants to go out and meet a woman. He goes to a bar, goes to a club, goes to a meetup, goes to a group gathering, goes to something. Now he's already in person with that woman. And I would just say, be your most authentic, real self. And, you know, take it from there, like allow it to flow. And so, and I actually teach this, like, how do you have conversations flow in such a way that, you know, hours can pass and you're really like on a good level, connecting deeply with each other. I think I'm one step behind this. And what that means is I have to do this online. And I think there's a block to getting someone to even see you. So, in the dating sense, the person just has to go out and now they're in person, they can show up and shine. I have no problem with this. You put me in front of any group of people, I can sell to you right in front of you. Zero problem. You can feel my energy. I think it's getting you to see me. And so I guess in the case of the guy, it would be like trying to get her off Tinder and trying to get her on that date. And I guess that would be like the most comparison. But I mean, I don't do Tinder for this reason. Like, I won't do online dating because I'm like, it's so inauthentic. You're just another number. You're like, people can't feel your energy. So, and that I feel that same way when it comes to sales. I'm like, people don't know who I am. They can't feel me through a screen. But if I can get you on a call, I'm definitely going to sell you. But getting you on the call is the struggle. The same way getting the Tinder date off Tinder is a struggle. There's hundreds of other people.
So, and what's the struggle?
I think the struggle is actually building an authentic, I don't want to say connection, but it's people are all energy. We feel, and so we lean into what we're feeling. And so it's really hard to grasp a feeling for a human being through texting and a screen.
Okay, so if you pause it right there,
Yeah.
what energy are you feeling when you think about reaching out in this way?
So energetically, I feel that people are going to say, oh, it's just another person selling to me something. It's
Okay,
kind of
so
like a number.
pause right there.
Yeah.
Right? So you are making the assumption for them. This is what they will think, right? Replace you with guy looking to date. Oh, there's no point in me like reaching out for this person. She's too good for me. Like the conclusion's been made prior to the actual interaction.
Yeah. Or like it's
Right.
just another guy on Tinder sending me a message.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but in this instance, right, like you're the guy sending the message, right? And you're saying no on the other person's behalf before you have any actual evidence that it is going to be a no. So in terms of like the energetics that I'm putting into it, you haven't started, but you've already distorted the energetics putting into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like checking in to see if that feels 100% right. There's parts of that that are definitely right. And I'm like, is there something else as well behind that?
Perfect. So which parts am I missing?
This is what I'm checking in about right now. I'm like, is there something more to that? Yeah, like when I would reach out, I would never, so in a nutshell, I would never want someone to think I'm only reaching out to them because they're a number, as in because I just want sales from them. So, and that's how it feels because I also don't know who they are.
Right.
So it's like I'm treating them as a number.
Fair. And it's a valid concern because you are in the relationship business. So to start a relationship with, superficial relationship seems very hypocritical. So I get the concern. When we started this conversation, right, like in passing, you had said, well, it feels weird to be salesy if I'm like messaging somebody to give me $8,000 for my program.
Yeah.
Right. So if you had a client who was like messaging, let's just say it's a guy messaging women like, hey, do you want to sleep with me? Right. Like, is that really the jump they need to be making at that stage?
No, but you get there eventually. This is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay.
Right? Like you're jumping into, I'm saying hello and like, let's get married. Meanwhile, like you said, there's been no connection. There's been no relationship, which in person, I don't have to think about it, but I actually navigate that transition naturally without thinking about it. Yet online,
yeah,
that is like I do want to message this person so I can get a sale. Yet the narrative is, well, the sale has to be as soon as I like send the message.
Okay.
I.e. the equivalent of the guy asking for whatever, marriage, sex right away.
Yes. So yes to all of it. And I think the extra layer is that whole process to build the relationship with all of these people feels so tedious. It's like maybe I have to give like 100 hours of my time to get one client. I'm like, oh my God, how many, like, I don't like to be stuck on my phone. I don't want to be stuck on my phone. I would rather be engaging with people, making connections like this. And you're like, I really liked her energy. I actually would love to know about her program. And that feels more real to me. I would rather spend 100 hours talking to you, dress code like this, than to be stuck on my phone because that feels tedious. And I'm like, oh my, I'm not seeing the end result from that. It's like, this is a long process. And I guess you could say there's an element of distrust. Like, do I really trust that at the end of this whole conversation, it's really going to fruit a client out of it? Maybe the same way the guy would say, like, do I trust if I actually spend the next 20 hours talking to her that I'm going to eventually have sex?
Correct. So,
Yeah.
and this is a perfect segue because it's going to be like the second thing that I wanted to dive
Yeah.
into, right? So one was that there's a lot of limiting narratives around doing things this way,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
I'm not at all saying this is actually the right way for you to go. Like, I don't know, but the limiting narratives are there, right? And even this whole layer that you just shed now, I don't know if 100 hours of reaching out to people is going to lead to just wasted 100 hours that I absolutely hated. You don't have any evidence to support that or confuse. Like, it is just a hypothesis of the worst case scenario of spending 100 hours doing this, right? So there I would explore, okay, like, is that resistance just whatever is around me reaching out and being viewed in a particular way? Or am I making this narrative based off of the what if the worst case scenario happens, right? So that's one element that I invite you to consider. The next one then is, let's just assume that that is absolutely clear, that like, this is not the way for me, even with the narratives, whatever. This is not the way that I want to do business. Cool. So I want to be the beacon that draws the right people in.
Yes.
Okay. Knowing that, being excited about that, what's stopping you from doing that consistently?
I'm starting to do that now. So I'm probably on average, I'm on about 2 podcasts a week now. And I've started reaching out to people in terms of public speaking opportunities and running events, like live events, to actually do my work, more like this. People can see me, they can see me talking. It's where my strength lies. So, and that feels very easy to do. I have no problem going on to like podcasting matchup sites and meeting people and connecting and getting them to interview me.
Perfect. And
So,
the
yeah.
event, like the event is what you run, like that's your business or
So
an area of your business, correct?
exactly. That's what I'm
Okay.
building out right now. Exactly.
Got it. So you have like your coaching and you have your business, like your events, and those are the two elements. Okay. Got it. So the through line then between the narratives on the reach out and getting onto podcasts is, I only feel comfortable when I have the permission to speak my truth. Right? Like, I'm getting onto a podcast that I align with, borrowing their audience, which is cool. But then there's a permission element of like, this person has invited me to be here, just like a person has invited me to talk about my stuff one-on-one. But anytime I have to be the one to lead that discussion, then there's a shutdown.
Yes.
So what lands for you there?
I think it's, I guess, very much like what you said about not having necessarily the permission. And I think it's, one, never wanting to disturb someone. And two, I think it's very much about reputation. So having to look a certain way. So never wanting to look desperate or needy, or unprofessional. Like, I want a clean, professional look. And for me, that doesn't look like having to come to you and it feels almost like begging. It's like, I want you to see, like I said, I want you to see, I want the exposure piece. And then you're like, wow, I really like that. She's professional. I'm going to go to her, versus like, who's this person coming to me, disturbing me, begging me, selling me. And that all of that is like a reflection on my reputation, and my reputation needs to be crystal clean.
Okay. And
We're having fun with this one, aren't we?
but I mean, that's for you to decide. Ultimately, if it's fun or not, I'll let you be the judge on that one.
Yeah.
So I have to maintain a crystal clear and a pristine reputation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think there's some baggage involved in that?
Certainly, I'm sure there is. Yeah.
Okay. What? And I mean, you're welcome to share as much as you
I mean,
want or not.
little room for error, I would
Yeah, I mean,
imagine. Yeah.
I know I'm poking right at the thing because I'm
Yeah.
asking you now. Okay, well, what if it's not pristine? Like, well, what if it's not perfect? What if it's not presented 100% neat? What if it's actually presented messy? What does that mean?
Then that means I am being tagged as messy, let's say, quote unquote. And I don't want myself or my work associated with anything messy or unprofessional. I want it to look clean because it is valuable, because anything I do is done fucking well. So if it even remotely presents as if it wasn't, um, then I would feel like people have the wrong impression about who I am, which is like unfair, because I'm like, the last thing I'd want you to think is that I'm unprofessional or inauthentic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how many relationships are pristine?
I mean, oh man, this is gonna sound so bad. I'm like, my relationships are pretty fucking pristine, but that's because I teach this, so they should be. But most relationships are not, which is also why I teach it, because they're not.
Right.
But I get what you're
So
saying.
when it comes to relatability, what do
Yeah.
you think people are going to relate to? The realness and the messiness of meeting them where they're at, or the pristine perfection that is
Once
presented?
once they're a client, once they know me, once they're in my life, people want messy. They want not messy, but they want real. They want authentic. I definitely understand that, and I know that. And they want to feel like they're talking to a human being. It's leading up to that. Like when I say messy, messy for me feels more like I'm pushing something onto you that you didn't ask for. And I think that goes back to the piece you said about like permission. So I would never want someone to feel like they're being impeded upon. And so I refuse to do that. So that would be more of what messy looks like to me, in which case, I don't know if I answered your question.
No, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
So even with that, let's say even taking it from the perspective of
Yeah.
relationships, in a relationship, if I make a request of my partner, I'm asking for something that I want. That request, by definition, can be denied.
Yeah.
Is that me being messy, unkept, and unpristine?
Definitely not. And that's this, I think this still goes back to the piece of having a conversation like this with someone and being able to feel out like all of the what I would call data points. So verbal speech, nonverbal communication, energy, all of that. I can read that off of you and then know how to gauge accordingly. But once again, when it's done through a screen, people can't gauge me. So because they don't have the ability to gauge my authenticity or how real I am or how much I care, I just think I'm getting slotted into a box, and I don't want to be slotted into that box.
Fair.
Yeah.
So what if you turn that around and say you can't gauge them?
I can't gauge them, or I can.
Correct. Through the superficialness of just text and the initial meeting, you can't gauge them.
I can't either, which is also what's really hard. I think it's
Okay.
both ways. Yeah.
So I find that interesting because your brain's default is to always mitigate the potential harm around
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
right? Like everything you spoke about from like when we talked about, okay, like if I'm reaching out, everything was about their reaction, right? Like they're going to think this, they're not going to
Yeah.
want this. I don't want to be the one that looks desperate.
Mm-hmm.
They,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So what you've created is a beautiful control structure where you only
Mm.
get into situations where you have the permission to speak your heart and your truth, and you never get into a situation where you or your ability to view the other person, there's no hindrance. You can read them perfectly. You can always be attuned to them,
Mm-hmm.
which means in many ways you can be attuned to who's safe and who isn't.
Yes.
Okay, so what lands for you there?
I mean, to me, it just sounds like like the word control comes up, but it's not control in a negative sense. It's just like being able to control the environment. So
Correct. Control from
yeah.
the sense of protection. I will control my environment. I will optimize my circumstances to be such where I have the upper hand to ensure that everyone around me, the interactions I'm likely to have the highest likelihood that they will be safe, that I can be seen, heard, and understood in a way that nobody's going to fret on that. But if I go into situations where it's completely like I don't have those advantages, like sending a random message, then I don't know how it will be received. People will reject me. People will think I'm salesy. This is going to ruin my reputation, right? Those are great labels for justifying really controlling your environment to always be safe.
Mm-hmm.
So what lands for
Mm-hmm.
you there?
The term safety feels close, but I'm still feeling like there's one layer deeper here that I'm like intuitively, this is just intuitive, that I'm like, there's still something to unravel.
Perfect. So if you
Yeah.
pause and tune into that, what comes up?
This may require another question. Because I'm not so sure, at least consciously, if it's like, do I feel unsafe?
I don't think you actually feel
Yeah.
unsafe in
Yeah.
situations where people might misunderstand you,
Mm-hmm.
but it is abundantly clear that your brain spends a lot of time, a lot of hypervigilance, a lot of
Mm,
looking around,
mm-hmm.
ensuring that you're always optimizing your environment, your setup
Yes.
to be where you have the most leverage. And you having the advantage of being able to read people really well, being able to navigate like
Mm-hmm.
conversations really well,
Mm-hmm.
you always show up in areas where the leverage is on your side.
Yes,
So
because
it's
I know
not
how to
safety
manipulate.
in that, like if you came to somebody who's like, no, you're full of shit, you wouldn't know how to deal with it. I don't
Yeah.
feel that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is something unsafe about uncontrolled perception,
Yes.
right? Because the other part that we didn't get to yet, which was okay, so we got to like the permission part, but I was like, okay, well then why not go out and create your own audience? Why not show up authentically with all of these beautiful qualities that you have to draw your own people in on your own accord and not borrow anybody else's? But that has the same qualities that we just described. If I go out and I am authentic to a whole bunch of strangers, the energy coming my way, I cannot control, I cannot optimize my environment to control for who I let in, who's around, who I have to deal with. It becomes a wild west,
Yeah.
right? Again, going
Mm-hmm.
against what the paradigm is here. So again, what lands for you there?
If it, I guess what I'm wondering is if like what is the distinction between not feeling comfortable putting myself out in an, let's say, uncontrolled environment via text versus being super comfortable putting myself out in an uncontrolled environment, like verbally or like visually. Because like visual, like public speaking, I've been doing it for years, super comfortable. I talk to lots of people,
Right.
don't know
Okay. So
any of them.
pause right there, right?
Yeah.
Public speaking, doing it for years. You've been speaking to either your own events or
Mm,
somebody else's events.
so others like just doing public speaking, things like even like Toastmasters. I don't know if
Okay.
you're familiar with it.
So
Yeah.
again, I have somebody else's permission who I vetted ahead of time and agreed, like I've sensed this is a safe
Mm-hmm.
place to go and speak
Mm-hmm.
my message. It's
Mm,
pre-vetted because two of you have to agree to do it,
yes.
right?
Okay. That's the piece then.
So what's
So
landing for you there?
I think it's then like once again going back to the impeding piece of like you don't know me for a hole in the wall and now I'm coming into your space and you didn't necessarily ask for it. So I think it's a boundaries thing. It's like I'm potentially crossing a boundary and I can't even gauge how well I'm crossing that boundary because maybe you're the average human being that needs to be like hit up, 5 to 10 times before you finally sign up for my program. But maybe you're someone that's more like me that's like, message me once, give me the offer, don't fucking bug me again. If I want it, then I will come to you because I know when I want things and when I don't. But I don't think most people function that way.
Right. So again, look at where your brain went to, right?
Yes.
You're having a moment of realization. It's starting to crystallize. Your
Mm-hmm.
brain right away went to crystallizing and rationalizing it from the perspective of the other, the perception of the other to how I
Yes.
show up,
Yes.
right? There's something fundamentally scary to your system about showing in your fullest light for everybody to see without filter, in standing in that, and then whatever the remainder of that is, being okay with other people not being okay, people throwing shade your way, people not understanding you, right? Could be all of those, could be none of those,
Yes.
could be some
Yeah.
combination of those, right? Because your
Mm-hmm.
brain always is defaulting to the perception of the other. And probably
Yes.
part of the reason why you're so good at what you do, because you spent a lifetime reading the other
Yeah.
in order to ensure that you are secure. So it's a beautiful gift that at some point got distorted as a protection mechanism.
Mm-hmm. I also
Right.
think it's what allows me to do what I do really fucking well.
100%. And as I
But
always say on this
not.
podcast too, like your primary strength oftentimes becomes your first distortion.
It's great.
Right. So it's like the man with the hammer problem. Like everything becomes a nail. So
Oh,
how do I
interesting.
navigate everything? Well, I navigated by being really attuned to the other. So now I'm trying to make a business
Mm,
by never having to go to places where I can't be attuned to the other.
hmm. Yeah, essentially. And I can't attune online and I can't attune to every individual unless I literally like very deeply spend so many hours of my life trying to get to know them before I finally am like, okay, this is probably the angle I could take with you to sell this to you. That just
Correct.
feels like a lot of energy and effort.
Correct. So now that brings up the opening of like, well, how is this how is this a problem in your business?
I think it shows up as a problem because if I'm the one that wants to at least initially start by doing the lead generating and bringing in more clients like on it systemically, like more structured as opposed to just strictly relying on referrals, then like I need to be the one to at least start that process to build out numbers to gain an awareness of
Okay. And
how
that's kind of what you
successful it
have to
is.
do. That's a good observation of what
Yeah.
needs to be done.
Yeah.
But the question was, how is my hesitation around showing up, like without being able to control the environment,
Mm-hmm.
actually creating a problem in my business?
It's just creating a block between me and people that I could potentially help. So it's not allowing me to actually reach out to people that could use my services.
And how is that affecting you?
Um, it's making me feel like this whole process is so fucking tedious. Like it's draining. We'll say it's draining.
Okay. And what specifically is draining?
What's draining is that it feels like a lot of energy and effort needs to go into something that I see for other business owners looks very fluid.
Okay. So I'm going to ask
This,
you to give me more specific. What specifically?
yeah. So, I mean, I'm, at least from what I'm observing, a lot of other coaches that could be steps ahead of me. I mean, they are steps ahead of me. I mean, timeline wise, seem like they've got systems built into place where they have clients coming in or at least calls coming in like on a regular basis. They know their numbers, they know how many people they convert, they know when to bring them into these groups and how they do it. Like everything's very well organized and like built out. So it doesn't require all this like tedious energy of like, I'm going to hop on a call with this person from LinkedIn today and that person. I do a lot of networking. So, I mean, it's easy for me. But at the end of the day, if I'm spending, 30 hours a week on calls with people just to network, I'm sure at some point that will, like, something will come out of it, but there's not clear systems. And so I think there not being a clear ending, it's like, I'll give a very clear example. So this all really makes sense, chalking it down. You go into university, there's 4 years. It's a lot of work in those 4 years, but at the end of those 4 years, you're going to get, graduating with honors or whatever it is, you're going to get a certificate. You know what your work is going towards. You can see the trajectory. If somebody said to you, keep going to university, we don't know how long it's going to take you, but eventually you might get a certificate. You're like, fuck, what's the point in doing this all? When am I going to be rewarded? Is it going to be like overnight, something's going to change? Or am I going to have to keep moving this way for the next 10 years before something finally takes off? So I think not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel because there's no clear systems in place is what's killing me.
Right. So on the flip side of that is welcome to entrepreneurship.
I know.
Right. So that's a problem every entrepreneur has.
Yeah. I think
So
it's a little bit more secure though when you've got numbers, and then moving back from that, numbers can come from taking steps like just going out and talking to people online without the fear of how they would judge you.
agreed.
Yes.
Now backtrack there. Those numbers
Hmm.
just don't show up as a lottery for lucky people versus unlucky people,
I agree. Yeah.
right? That they are created, that they are brought into existence through a series of actions, and then behind those actions are various emotions and thoughts.
Yes.
So for you, what is missing to create this level of process that you're looking for?
I mean, very simplistically, for if we were to be calculated, I could say, let me add 100 friends to Facebook a day, have a conversation with maybe 20 of them,
So
maintain
that's
that
tactically.
conversation.
What about you
Yes.
personally?
Maybe I'm not understanding, because I think the part I'm saying is tactically I won't even take those steps because I
I
don't.
agree
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's kind of what I was saying at the beginning. Like, I don't necessarily see that, one by one reach out is going to be your
Yeah.
path forward. I don't feel that.
Yeah.
What I do feel wants to come out is kind of like that lighthouse bit, right? Like you want to establish yourself as the lighthouse that beams a certain message,
Mm,
right? And only attracts certain boats to its
mm,
harbors,
mm-hmm.
right? That's what wants to emerge. And right now that is emerging in little pockets where
Yes.
you have, or your subconscious has confirmed you are safe, and
Okay.
you realize that those pockets you've kind of maximized for, like
Okay.
you've reached a threshold of like where they're going to serve the
Yeah.
next version of you and your business.
Okay.
So number one, does that resonate with you?
Yes, totally. Fully.
Okay. So you want to go to bigger shores, you want a
Yes.
bigger harbor, you want a bigger light, etc. Okay.
Yes.
That is going to require the letting go of this inner mechanism that keeps you safe by controlling for the environments with which you shine your light.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That is going to be a requirement for you, regardless of whether you do 100 reach outs, you just do 100 videos where you're shining your light and you throw them out into the wild of the internet, you do 100
Mm-hmm.
podcasts, right? It's going to require blossoming for your next step.
Okay.
So how does that land for you?
I mean, I'm definitely agreeing with everything you're saying. I'm following for sure. It's making sense. I guess what comes next that I'm wondering then is, okay, so with this awareness, and I do agree, then what?
Then what?
Then,
What do you
like,
mean?
what is required of me in order to, or what would create that safety feeling?
Right. So that's what I do in my programs,
Yeah.
which is get you to remove all of the programming in the head trash that right now is in the
Mm-hmm.
way of that.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a much longer discussion. We can certainly have it, but that's the piece. Like, not removing this piece of needing the unconscious safety, that's going to distort whatever tactical thing you choose. Like if you go and you like hire somebody to make your funnels and like all you do is run ads, there's still going to be a part of you that's going to be scared to show up in the most authentic way, in the most lighthouse way that you could show up, even if you're paying for ads to show it now in front of thousands of people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like they are two independent things. So there's, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's kind of where my mind
Mm-hmm.
went to.
Okay. Yeah. Um, yeah, I guess I'm kind of just like, and what next? Now that there's an awareness of safety, I'm like, okay, did I like, is that the piece? I'm very thorough. Like, I'm like, is that it? Is that the only thing? Is there more to this? What do I
Yeah,
need to
I
do
agree
next?
with you. That is probably the iceberg thing. Like that's how the pattern shows up. But what's behind that and what's underneath the surface is probably a lot more involved. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is clearly a pattern you've had for a long time. Like you said it yourself, it is this quality that makes me really good at what I do,
Mm-hmm.
which means you have repeated this thousands upon thousands of times in all instances of your life, right? All of the comments about like being pristine in my reputation. That means you're optimizing for this type of thing in a lot of other areas in your life.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So there's a very strong through line where you're going to have a lot of emotional pieces. There's going to be a lot of narrative and belief pieces. There's going to be a lot of somatic pieces
Yeah.
that need to all release and then align with whatever the tactical up-leveled action is. Meaning, okay, like I know I really want, like now that these things are clear, I'm not afraid to shine my light. What I really want to do is just build my own audience and not borrow other people's. Cool. Right. Then you're going to know the tactics of how to do that. It
Yeah.
doesn't sound to me like a skill gap. You know what I mean? But that's
Yeah.
kind of in a short nutshell
Yeah.
what the process would look like.
Okay. Okay. Got
Perfect.
it.
So just so that we're okay on time,
Yeah.
I know this obviously doesn't solve your problem, but as far as the awareness piece, does this feel complete or is there something left outstanding?
Um, I would love to hear you summarize what you interpreted. That way it could sort of put it together very cleanly in a box for me.
Perfect. So the irony is I always
Yeah.
actually ask the guests to summarize in their own words.
Mm.
And the reason I'm going to throw it back at you is, as we saw at the beginning, your brain's default is to always look to the other, right? Like you're
Yeah.
asking me to
Mm-hmm.
summarize your awareness of
Mm-hmm.
an aha moment. Why? It's your awareness. Who cares what I think?
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Like you didn't ask me to like clarify or add to something that you feel sharing. You've basically outsourced a vulnerable moment to me.
Okay. Yeah, the first thing that comes up in my mind is sometimes my memory is just what it does. But I mean, more than anything, what like baseline came up is safety.
Yeah.
It's like the most thing that stood out was lighthouse and then safety. Um, yeah, now I'm kind of like I'm aware of that, and it's not crystal clear. We'll say
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And I think that's, well, first and foremost, acknowledge you for being fully transparent and
Hmm.
messy with that. Like it wasn't perfect, it wasn't pristine. So thank you
Yeah.
for going there. Um, Two, I think there's good reason as to why it's not.
Mm.
This is a core part of who you are. It's a core part that has kept you safe for a very long time. It is a core part of your gift. So for you to poke around in it, there's going to be defenses that come up. Not
Mm.
remembering, not getting it, you tell me what the answer is. Those are all defenses to not go where this part is scared to actually go. You know, and I'm not saying that out of judgment, I'm saying that out of observation and
Hmm.
to normalize your experience of like, yeah, like the reason that it feels hard. Because for somebody who's very attuned to like conversations and can keep up and can like guide them,
Hmm.
I can imagine this is not a typical thing for you to just be like, oh, I don't know. Right. So the only reason I'm sharing that is like, there is tremendous importance for you to explore this because so many of your faculties are fighting against it, as you
Hmm.
already know, right? Like where the
Mm.
biggest resistance is, that's where the biggest breakthrough is.
Mm. Hmm.
So how does that land?
Yeah, I was just analyzing as you were speaking. It's interesting because when I do work on my clients, I'm very good at summarizing everything that takes place within them, and I can organize it very cleanly.
Yep.
But I find anytime, even like when I'm in sessions or workshops or things like that, I find when the person will ask, like, can you recap everything I shared? I'm kind of like, I don't even know what we just talked about.
And that's fair. And
Yeah,
I would distinguish
yeah,
between like having utmost presence to be with the person and then you're just kind of channeling what comes out. That's a
yeah,
beautiful coach quality.
yeah,
I don't necessarily think that's what's happening here. Right.
yeah.
I think they're two distinct aspects. And I know exactly what you're talking about because I go through the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what's happening here.
Yeah, I can't really argue yes or no because I just know the like in general, my brain is just like, okay, I know we talked. It just something doesn't seem it doesn't seem linear clear yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to. There's no test at the end of this that
Yeah.
you have to
No,
take. So
yeah.
you're all good, right? You won't get a report card at the end of the podcast. I promise. It's all
I
good.
mean, I would probably just listen to this again and then I would start taking notes down and drawing connections again for myself. And then I'd be
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
That part is totally fine. So
Yeah.
on that note, we're just gonna close it off here. So why don't you then let everybody know where to find you, who's the best person to find you? Floor is yours for that.
Yeah. Are we adding any links in this by any
Yeah,
chance? Because
all the
people
links that
are,
you provided will be added. This is just your opportunity to make
yeah,
whatever invite you want.
brilliant. So, I mean, you're all welcome to reach out to me on any form of social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. It's all great. Feel free to check out my website, giovannaelias.co. And yeah, connect with me. Let's chat.
Beautiful. Well, Giovanna, thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
coming on, allowing yourself to be messy.
Mm.
And we'll, of course, include all those in the show notes. And for everybody else listening, we'll see you on the next one.